I have a question to start with. How many of you have read Dreams from My Father? Wow. How many of you have read The Audacity of Hope? That's extraordinary. Yeah. Wow. When I began work on this in England, when I was teaching at the University of Cambridge, it was the year that Obama was elected president, and at that point, almost no one had read The Audacity of Hope. Dreams from My Father was already a very widely read and admired book, but very few people took seriously the arguments that Obama laid out in The Audacity of Hope. And that, in a certain way, was the inspiration for writing my book, Reading Obama. Because it seemed to me that people, as fascinated as they were with him as a figure in American culture, did not take seriously the possibility that this charismatic black man might also be a very serious thinker and contributor to American intellectual history, as well as the history of race in America and the history of politics in America. And so I undertook, in the way that an intellectual historian would do, to read very carefully everything I could find that Obama had read, including both of those books, articles he had written, speeches he had written, in the attempt to piece together a coherent worldview. And then after doing that, I tried to place those texts in their contexts in the way that intellectual historians do, by looking at the biographical context, the social context, the political context, and the intellectual context. I talked to everybody I could find who knew him, who had taught him, who had gone to school with him, who had had contact with him at the various stages of his life. And a portrait emerged that was consistent between the texts that he had produced and the impressions that people who knew him had of him in the different stages of his life. And so Reading Obama is an attempt to put together his ideas and the framework within which he came of age. Now, for me, to a certain extent, the issue that Jim raised at the outset was less urgent than it is for some historians, because I was writing about the texts that Barack Obama had already produced by the time I was writing. I was trying neither to predict what would happen in his presidency, nor to evaluate the success of his presidency. But instead, I was attempting to locate him in very long traditions of American thought and American politics. And so what I found in doing that was the extent to which he actually reflects the principal transformation in post-World War II American culture. Any of you who have read Dan Rogers' recent book, Age of Fracture, will be familiar with these themes. But there's several themes that I try to lay out in the book and then describe and discuss in relation to Obama's own presentation of himself in Dreams from My Father. You might recall that in the early pages of that book, he talks about the way in which his grandparents and his mother were captured by the universalism of the middle decades of the 20th century. The idea of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, the civil rights struggle, the notion that there was a stable and universal standard of justice that people all over the world could recognize. But he then notes that he finds those ideals to be illusions, to be fictions. And he notes that he came to stand in the place where his grandparents and his mother's dreams had been. So the question is, why does he refer to those ideals as illusions, as fictions? And the answer to that question, I think, has to do with the transformation of American social thought in the second half of the 20th century, in the years when Barack Obama is coming of age. What happens through the work of people like John Rawls, the neo-pragmatists, Richard Rorty, Hilary Putnam, Richard Bernstein, cultural anthropologists like Clifford Geertz, historians of science like Thomas Kuhn, is that the entire notion of universal truths, of non-historical principles, of understandings that transcend particular cultures, comes under erasure. It comes under question. It's replaced by an awareness of the particularity of cultures, the historical shaping of all ideas and ideals. the variability of cultures, both across space and across time. And those are the understandings that emerge in the writings of Barack Obama. If you've internalized those ideas, it's much harder for you to proceed as a dogmatic partisan of a particular point of view. You're much more likely to see the world from a variety of perspectives and to see the possibility that there is no single truth. The truth instead is a product of historical processes, and that it is always under suspicion. It's always possible for it to change. As I looked at Obama's portrait of American history in The Audacity of Hope, what struck me was the extent to which he teases out the themes from the American past that are congruent with this understanding of how ideas develop and how ideas change. When he talks about the Constitution, he talks about the compromises that were necessary for a Constitution to be written in the first place. And he talks about the ways in which everyone in the Constitutional Convention was required to give a little in order to get a document that all of them could accept. The final product, he points out, was not in the minds of any individuals when they entered the Constitutional Convention. It's a compromise that is hammered out through the process of deliberation. And as far as Obama is concerned, at least as he presents it in that book, that's how democracy has to work. Everyone who enters a deliberative process has to be willing to take seriously the point of view of people with whom they disagree profoundly, in order that some shared understanding might emerge from the give and take of democratic deliberation. Now, that's a way of thinking about politics that many people in politics would find incomprehensible. Politics is about fighting. Politics is about staking out your ground and defending it, come what may. But what I found was that throughout his life, Obama had approached controversy, had approached disagreement with that perspective. That the solution lies in finding positions somewhere in between those who have dug in their heels and reframing problems in a way that new solutions can be found. That's his way of understanding the Progressive Period. That's his way of understanding the New Deal. That's even his way of understanding the Civil Rights Movement, where he counterposes the moderation of Martin Luther King to the radicalism of Malcolm X and like Stokely Carmichael. Now, that's not a way of thinking about politics that a lot of Americans in 2011 or 2012 find congenial. Most of us think we know the truth, and we think we know that our enemies are wrong, and that they deserve to lose. What's decisive about democracy, I think, and Jim mentioned this project I'm working on that traces the idea of democracy from the ancient world up to our own day, is that democracy never works when people look at it that way. Democracy requires the willingness to lose to your worst enemy. If your worst enemy has more votes than you do, you simply have to swallow and go on. Most of us have a very difficult time doing that. Barack Obama, from a very early age, showed the capacity to roll with the punches, to find ways forward when he was not satisfied with outcomes. It was true as a community organizer in Chicago, it was true in the state legislature, it was true in the United States Senate. And one of the striking things to me since the book was published is the number of people I've heard from who knew him at various stages of his career, who wrote to me to say, "You've got it right. That's how he is." Journalists have written to me to say, "I've seen this in him, but I didn't understand where it came from." One of the people he knew from Occidental sent me the letters that he had sent when he was at Columbia, in which this same sensibility, this willing to see a variety of points of view, is already present in this college junior and senior. This is an extraordinary capacity to empathize. And if you think about his speeches, the number of times he emphasizes the theme of empathy. It's what he says he took from his mother. It's what he says he thinks America needs. That was the theme of the Tucson address. And it's a theme that emerges even in the most partisan of his speeches, such as the one he gave in Osawatomie on December 6th, in which he begins the campaign by again enunciating the importance of equality, the importance of addressing the increasing inequality in America, but he looks for a way forward that can bring the largest possible number of people together. So this is the person I discovered, and this is the person whose character has been confirmed to me from the people who have gotten in touch with me, the people I've talked with in the years since the book was published. It's a person whose approach to politics and problem solving is not congenial to everybody in America. But it's the reason why I haven't been terribly surprised by the way in which the presidency has unfolded. I've been disappointed by the outcomes, as everybody on the left is, but I haven't been surprised. This man has been a moderate conciliator, an experimentalist rather than a dogmatist from the earliest days that we have tracking of who he was. And I suspect that although people become more of a partisan in the campaign in order to win the re-election that I am confident he will win, I suspect when it's time to govern, he will continue trying to do what he has done his entire life, and that is to find common ground and to move gradually, slowly, incrementally in the direction of more robust democracy, which is where he would like to see us go, but that he thinks we can only achieve through the process of compromise and conciliation, not through the process of increasing partisanship and deepening hatreds.